Hey folks, it is Dennison Bertram, co-founder and CEO of tally.xyz, the best tool out there to launch your ICO or operate your token-based organization. And this is my first video of the new year, and I'm going to cover what, frankly is the most important thing on my mind for the year. And that is the Clarity Act. So this is essentially my update on the Clarity Act, right? So for years, US crypto has lived in a gray zone. Regulators stretched decades-old securities and commodity laws over assets and market structures that were never really written for. The Digital Asset Market Clarity Act of 2025, universally shortened to the Clarity Act, was Congress's first serious attempt to replace that ambiguity with a purpose-built framework. So at its core, Clarity tries to do three things: define what different kinds of digital assets are, decide who regulates them, and set ground rules for the middlemen who run the markets. So let's talk a little bit about the original purpose of Clarity. When White House leaders introduced Clarity in spring 2025, they framed it as a market structure bill, not about taxing or banning crypto, but about organizing the basic plumbing of trading and issuance for crypto. Right, so some of the key original goals included clear asset classifications. The bill draws a line between digital commodities, like many fungible tokens on mature decentralized blockchains, and investment contract assets that, well, look more like securities. They did regulator demarcation, right? They wanted to give the CFTC exclusive jurisdiction over spot markets and digital commodities traded on new CFTC registered venues, so digital commodity exchanges, brokers, and dealers, while preserving the SEC's authority over genuinely securities-like assets and activities. They also wanted to modernize protections, right? So it layers in customer asset segregation, anti-fraud and anti-manipulation rules, disclosure and ongoing reporting for certain issuers, and Bank Secrecy Act compliance for intermediaries. So put simply, the original purpose was to give developers, exchanges, and investors a predictable rule book, and to do it without forcing everything into the securities bucket by default. So the House version, HR 3633, they packaged up this framework in the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act of 2025 and moved it through both financial services and agriculture committees before passing it on the floor in July of 2025. Substantively, the House bill defines digital assets and mature blockchains. So assets on sufficiently decentralized mature networks can qualify as digital commodities and, subject to volume and other limits, avoid SEC registration as securities. It builds new CFTC registrant types by creating digital commodity exchanges, brokers, dealers, and custodians with capital, risk management, record keeping, and customer protection requirements. Plus limits on using customer assets, for example, for staking without express consent of the customer. It also preempts some state laws, right? The bill treats qualifying digital commodities as covered securities for certain purposes, preempting state blue sky registration and easing the multi-state compliance difficulty that crypto's still in. So in July 17th, the House passed Clarity with bipartisan support and then sent it to the Senate, where unfortunately, or fortunately, the real negotiation began. All right. So the Senate's version, same destination, but kind of a different route. The Senate never simply copy and pasted HR 3633. Instead, Senate Banking and Agriculture committees worked up their own digital asset market structure drafts that drew heavily on Clarity concepts, but tweaked the balance between consumer protection, enforcement, and innovation. Analysis of the Banking Committee draft highlights several themes where it diverges from or sharpens the House approach. They want to have stronger consumer protection and prudential tilt. So the Senate draft leans more heavily into guardrails around stablecoins, conflicts of interest, and risk management for trading platforms and custodians, reflecting banking's traditional focus on financial stability. Where the House version carves out a range of technology and infrastructure activities from full securities regulation, Senate language reportedly narrows some exceptions or conditions to them on additional safeguards. Right? Senators from both parties have signaled more skepticism about broad preemption of state rules and about any framing that appears to strip the SEC of too much authority. That shows up in the Senate drafts with more explicit enforcement and oversight backstop. In short, the Senate's version is less a line-by-line companion bill and more an alternative blueprint built on the same foundations: shared definitions, a central CFTC role for digital commodities, and a clear SEC lane for true securities. What has happened since? Because, well, it is January 2026, and we still don't have a market structure bill in hand. So, the negotiations and line drawing that's gone on. Since House passage, the story of clarity has mostly been a story of negotiation. Consumer groups and regulators have all pushed to redraw particular lines. How generous should the path be from investment contract to digital commodity as a network matures? How far should federal law go in preempting states? How tightly should centralized exchanges and stablecoin issuers be supervised? Well, the commentary throughout mid and late 2025 points to several pressure points. The SEC-CFTC balance, right? Stakeholders debated whether clarity tilts too far towards the CFTC and away from the SEC, and whether that can invite regulatory arbitrage or leave investors exposed. Treasury and AML expectations. Treasury-focused analysis examined how Clarity's CFTC-centric model intersects with anti-money laundering obligations, sanctions expectations, and oversight of digital commodity pools. Then, of course, political timing. With an election year on the horizon and other legislative priorities competing for floor time, leadership in both chambers needed a package that could get 60 Senate votes without igniting a partisan brawl. By last month, December, the outlines of a compromise had emerged in the Senate, setting the stage for the first formal showdown over actual legislative text. So that brings us to this month and looking forward. Senators on the Banking Committee have landed on January 15th, 2026, in a few days, for a markup of the crypto market structure legislation widely referred to as Clarity. This is what it means and what to watch for. The markup is the moment when the committee members debate and vote on amendments, then decide whether to send a bill, possibly heavily revised from the House version, to the full Senate. It is the first on-the-record test of bipartisan support. Reporting suggests that many amendments will be hammered out in advance to avoid surprises and to reduce floor drama, with banking and agriculture expected to coordinate so their pieces of the market structure puzzle fit together. Optimistic projections from market watchers envision a path where, if markup goes smoothly, the Senate could pass a reconciled bill within 30 to 45 days and then negotiate final language with the House. For anyone who's been following regulatory clarity as a theme, January 15th is less the finish line than the moment Congress finally moves from concept to concrete Senate text. The outcome will show whether clarity remains a House-driven vision or becomes truly a bicameral framework that can actually reach the president's desk. So, that's it for now. I will definitely keep you posted as we get closer to the 15th. This is super important both for the industry, but also for me personally. So I'll keep you up to date with everything as it comes in. And like always, I'll see you the next time.